Super Mario 3D World often goes under the radar as both a game alongside a speedrun, but over the last 12 years, this game has been absolutely shredded to pieces behind the scenes. There's crazy movement, clever routes, absurd tricks, and most importantly, there is no shortage of iconic world records. Just 2 years after the game was released, King Boo would be the first ever person to beat the entire game in under an hour and 40 minutes, which was a monumental milestone at the time. Over the course of the next year and a half, he would lower the record all the way to a 138.43. This 138.43 very quickly became this game's longest standing world record. Only after 3 years was it finally beaten by Yandema, and if we fast forward all the way to 2025, the record has now dropped all the way to a 134.29 thanks to Luigi Master. While all of these world records are impressive within their own rights, there is one thing that I haven't mentioned about them, and is the fact that they were all done on the Wii U version of the game. As we all know, 3D World was re-released on the Switch in 2021, and you would think that this wouldn't have much of an effect on the speedrun. Re-releases or remasters usually make speedruns less interesting, as the developers tend to patch out game-breaking tricks and/or mechanics. So when Nintendo re-released 3D World, they tried their absolute best to patch as many game-breaking exploits as possible. While this new release saw a few patches, this was ultimately one of those rare cases in which the subsequent version of the game is actually more broken than its predecessor. But before I talk about why this is the case, I think it is important for me to touch base on a few general changes. There is usually a save prompt after each level, which usually takes a few seconds to process before you have access to your character again. Throughout the course of an entire run, this adds up to a little over 2 minutes, which is an absurd amount of time. Players did end up finding a way to combat this by overloading their Wii U with memory to the point in which the save function no longer worked, but nonetheless, autosave skips were now placed into the game, meaning that speedrunners no longer had to go through this arduous process. You are now also able to move through the overworld faster, and on top of that, there are notable cutscenes you no longer have to sit through. While these quality of life changes significantly lowered 3D World's best theoretical time, Nintendo was able to successfully patch one glitch that was crucial to the run. To unlock the final level in World 8, you need 170 green stars. The ordinary level will contain 3 green stars, but since some of these stars are slow to collect, players will pick and choose the fastest stars to get, and then whatever is left will be obtained through non-ordinary levels, such as this mystery house in World 2, in which you are able to collect 5 of them. Unfortunately, there is a mystery house that contains 10 of these green stars in World 4, but since we warped the World 5 from 4-2, it is impossible to access this house. That is, with the patching of this glitch. By doing a well-timed jump, you are able to jump onto the edge of this pipe in the overworld, and from there, you are able to walk off of it in a way that allows for you to reach the aforementioned World 4 Mystery House. With that being said, there are a plethora of glitches that Nintendo attempted to patch, and I would argue that the most notable of these glitches would be all the different quirks within each of the characters' movesets. Jump height had been nerfed, the speed you could obtain off a slope had been nerfed, speed crouching on the ice had been nerfed, but at the same time, certain mechanics such as rolling and run speed had been buffed to the point in which we now had a moveset that was infinitely more overpowered than what we had access to before, which is the exact opposite of what Nintendo was trying to go for. This is a side-by-side comparison of the very first level, and as you can see on the Switch version, Luigi is already gaining copious amounts of speed before even collecting a catsuit, which is not the case on the Wii U version. While Luigi can be seen rolling falling, there are two other techniques that are at play here. The first is vectoring, which is when you move your character side to side as a means of gaining speed and momentum. The second technique is arguably Mario 3D World's most broken mechanic, and that is none other than crouch boosting. While crouch boosting is very useful in the Wii U version, it is way more exploitable on the Switch. If you crouch right before landing on the ground, you are able to gain a tad bit of speed, and if you do this over and over again, the speed will begin to compound at an alarming rate. When you then combine these techniques with power-ups such as the Tanuki suit or most infamously the cat suit, the end result is a speedrun in which you are able to just tear your way through every level, assuming everything goes right. But before we get into that, I have a word from today's sponsor, which is none other than Manta Sleep. Sleep is easily one of the most important parts of your day, which is why I've been ecstatic to use their sleeping mask. It's almost scary how fast this thing will put me to sleep. It's completely blackout, it's comfortable around the face, and you can sleep in any position with this mask on, which is nice because I am constantly moving around in my sleep. There are multiple masks, which are all equipped to fit any preferences you have, and there's even a mask with built-in Bluetooth, which means that you can fall asleep even while listening to my awesome and beautiful voice. So with that being said, I'd highly encourage you all to use code ANTA in the description to get 10% off your Manta order. Now before I get into what might possibly be one of speedrunning's most underrated and impressive journeys, it's important that I explain how speedrunners exploit both the characters alongside the power-ups. As per usual, Mario renders himself as completely useless in his own game, and Rosalina isn't unlocked until after the speedrun is finished, which means that we have these three characters to work with. Luigi is by far the most used character throughout the run, as he is the most slippery, a trait that is really useful to have as far as crouch boosting and vectoring is concerned. He also has the highest jump out of the cast, but with that being said, Peach's float comes in handy for making large cuts on certain levels, while Toad's speed comes in handy on levels in which there isn't a lot of extensive platforming. As you can imagine, the Tanuki suit is more useful for stages in which there is a lot of horizontal distance to cover, while the cat suit is more useful for stages in which there is a lot of vertical distance to be covered. Furthermore, the cat suit has a few of its own techniques that can be used in conjunction with aforementioned techniques. Most notably, you can use both cat scratches alongside cat slides to preserve and gain speed and momentum. So come launch day, speedrunners very quickly got the work, and after a month, Luigi Master had managed to bring the world record all the way down to a 1:34.09. Even with a run that had plenty of room for improvement, this record from 4 years ago is still faster than the modern day Wii U world record that was achieved just 2 months ago at the time of this recording, which goes to show just how broken the Switch version really is. Within the following weeks, a player who goes by the name of Shoyu would snag the record from Luigi, getting a time of 1:33 and marking the beginning of what might possibly be this game's biggest record rivalry. By the end of April 2021, the record had dropped all the way down to a 1:31.34. The most impressive part about this run is that this run by Luigi still had a plethora of mistakes. As per usual with speedrunning, Luigi listed all the stages he felt he did bad in, and as you can see, this is not a short list by any means. Nonetheless, both Luigi and Shoyu were starting to get a better grasp on what was and wasn't optimal, and more importantly, they were starting to get a better grasp of the game's movement. If either player was going to have a chance at beating the game in under an hour and 30 minutes, then they were going to have to master the exploitation of all of these different techniques, and given both how optimized the record was getting alongside the complexity of 3D World's movement, this is something that very well could have taken years to achieve. But after a month and a half of no records, Shoyu would take us one step closer to the elusive sub 130, getting a time of 1:30.43. As you can imagine, most of the time save in this record came from cleaning up mistakes that Luigi had made in his 1:31, with this being both the first 1:30 alongside a massive cut on the previous record. It was looking like this is where the record was going to stay for a bit, but just 4 days later, something insane would be pulled off during a run. Usually there are these 5 key coins that need to be collected before you can progress through this level and ultimately make it to this island, but like I said, players were starting to get a better grasp on the game's movement, and so with enough crouch boosting and cat swiping, you were just barely able to make it to this island and ultimately cut off about half of the stage. Later on, players would start doing the skip using the Tanuki suit, which saved even more time, but for now, this skip is what ultimately made Luigi the first ever person to beat Super Mario 3D World in under an hour and a half. Even though Shoyu was still actively playing the game, Luigi's record would remain on top for weeks, which were then turning into months. But right when summer was coming to a close, Shoyu would get on this ridiculous pace. Despite being a little over halfway through the game, his best possible time sat at a 128.04. Not only was he on pace to get his first 129, but he was on pace to shatter it and potentially get the first ever 128. While this death may have killed 128, Shoyu still had a chance at destroying the world record going into World 7, but alas, the nerves were simply too much to handle, and so he closed the run out with a time that was just short of the record. While he may have not gotten the record, this run was definitely a testament to how much potential was still out there, not to mention that this was still a massive moment for Shoyu, given that he was now the second person to achieve a 129. Now remember how I was going over Nintendo's patches? Well, on World 8's final stage, there is this infamous skip that you can do in which you build up speed with this slope in the cat suit, in which you could then preserve that speed upon collecting the Tanuki suit, allowing you to fly all the way to Bowser without having to take this painfully long ride. But since the Switch version now had nerfed slope speed, this method of doing the trick was no longer conceivable, leading players to believe that the skip was no longer possible. But with the power of the Tanuki suit, alongside some clever crouch boosting, Luigi was able to pull this off on a world record pace run. Like I said earlier, Shoyu had gotten on a 128 pace run without the skip, which meant that with a good run, either one of them would be more than capable of achieving a 127. So with this in mind, they'd both continue to grind out attempts, with Luigi ultimately edging Shoyu out with a 128.03. Either player was more than capable of getting a 127 at this point, but if there's one thing you should know about Luigi, it's that he is, for the most part, a rather defensive player. What I mean by this is that he usually waits for someone to take the world record from him before kicking it into first gear himself, and so for the next 5 months, 128.03 is where the record would stand. But on March 12th of 2022, Shoyu would once again get another chance at breaking the record. Despite this mishap at the end, alongside a few other mistakes, Shoyu had become the first ever person to beat the game in under an hour and 28 minutes. And then Luigi beat Shoyu by 20 seconds just 6 days later. Imagine spending months upon months trying to beat someone else's time just for that someone to come back and beat you in less than a week. This has essentially become the norm in the world of 3D World speedrunning. Shoyu would grind for a new world record, and then Luigi would always come back to play defense. But after this record, that pattern would break, as the next record to follow would be one of the most shocking times the community had ever seen. In 6 months, the record had only gone down from 128.03 to 127.40, but in less than a month, Luigi was able to achieve the next minute barrier, getting a time of 126.42. It was safe to say that this record was going to stand for a very long time, but how exactly was he able to do this in the first place? Well, if it wasn't obvious by now, every single level was seeing some sort of improvement as a result of more optimized movement, and going forward, that is where most of the time save is going to come from. This record also had a faster 6-4 accidentally. Luigi had gone so fast in this level that he accidentally got a platform cycle that no one had ever pulled off in a world record before, but even this only saves a few seconds. The most notable time saves come from what I like to call the Tanuki suit revolution. Take 5-1 for example. Remember how players would use the cat suit to make it all the way over to this island? Well, if you just just do some vectoring and crouch boosting with the Tanuki suit, you are able to make it over to this island much quicker. It was clear that the Tanuki suit had the potential to bring the world record down by a large margin, but for now, Luigi's record remained. After an entire year, Shoyu would finally come back and bring the record down to a 1:26.08, but as per usual, Luigi would once again beat the world record a few weeks later, this time getting the first ever 1:25. It's safe to say that this is the first ever world record void of any big time loss. I mean, sure, Shoryu had stringed together runs that didn't feature any big mistakes, but at the same time, he also went for safer strategies than Luigi did. To really put this into perspective, Shoryu would usually play within a minute or two of what would be a perfect run for him, while Luigi would usually play within 2 to 3 minutes of what would be considered a perfect run for him. So while this did make Shoryu a much more consistent player, there will come a point in every speedrun in which both speed and consistency become the norm, which is exactly what happened with this 1:25.33. With that being said, there were still seconds to be saved on a plethora of levels, and Luigi and Shoryu were fully aware of this, but nonetheless, Shoryu's time still stands at a 1:26.08 at the time of this recording, with Luigi fully moving on from the category after getting his new record. So while it looked like top level any percent was dead, a lot of optimizations were being made to levels in the background, with even more levels falling victim to the Tanuki suit revolution. Remember that platform cycle in 6-4? Yeah, how about we just fly to the end of the stage instead? It was basically becoming the norm to use a Tanuki suit on levels that were mostly flat, and as a result, other players were starting to reap the benefits of these newfound optimizations. An entire year would go by, and while Luigi and Shoryu were still at the top, a third player had finally worked her way up to world record potential. This is Xylix, and in the summer of 2024, she would get on this run.
Wait, get the flag, get the flag, not the flag.
We're rigged. We're rigged.
No.
Oh my
Oh my god, no. No way. Oh my god.
Wait, no.
You may think that Xylix was a new and upcoming player, but the truth was that she had poured thousands of hours into the game, just like the other two. But nonetheless, she kept on pushing for the world record.
Please! Please! Do it! Yes! Yes! What? What just happened? What just happened?
After thousands of attempts, Xylix had become the first to break Mario 3D World's biggest barrier to date. At the current time of this recording, the world record now stands at a 1:24.31 by Luigi, but I think it's safe to say that this minute barrier is not where this game's story ends.